Humanity has long grappled with the question of meaning. From ancient philosophers to modern psychologists, people have sought to understand their purpose in the universe. Religions, ideologies, and personal philosophies have risen around this central question: why are we here? But what if the search itself is misguided? What if life, in its raw, untamed form, has no inherent meaning, and that this very lack of meaning is the ultimate freedom? In a world increasingly defined by uncertainty, absurdity, and complexity, the idea that life has no predetermined purpose might not be a despairing thought at all. It could be liberating. This article explores the philosophical, psychological, and existential implications of a life without inherent meaning and why that may not be a problem to solve, but a truth to embrace. The historical obsession with meaning. The search for meaning is ancient. From the Bhagavad Gita to the writings of Plato and Aristotle, from the Book of Ecclesiastes to modern philosophers like Sartre and Camus, the idea that life must have a purpose has remained central to human thought. Religions typically offer clear, if dogmatic, answers. Christianity promises salvation and eternal life. Islam, submission to God's will. Hinduism and Buddhism, cycles of rebirth and eventual liberation. In contrast, secular ideologies like humanism and rationalism strive to find meaning through progress, knowledge, or collective well-being. Yet in the 20th and 21st centuries, a different narrative began to take shape, rooted in existentialism, nihilism, and absurdism. These perspectives don't necessarily reject the search for meaning but question whether the universe contains any to begin with. Existentialism and the individual's burden. Existentialists such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir argued that life has no intrinsic meaning. Rather, meaning is something we create ourselves. This might sound hopeful, but it places a heavy burden on the individual. If there's no preordained purpose, we must bear full responsibility for crafting one from scratch. Sartre famously said, "Existence precedes essence," implying that we are not born with an essence, purpose, or soul. Instead, we exist first, and only afterward define who we are through our actions and choices. In this sense, meaning becomes a personal project, a lifelong endeavor of self-creation. But even this empowering view of individual authorship can feel exhausting. If you are solely responsible for your life's meaning, what happens when you fail to find it or when your carefully constructed identity collapses? The absurd, Camus and the clash of meaning-seeking in a meaningless world. Albert Camus offers perhaps the most accessible and poetic vision of what it means to confront a meaningless universe. In the myth of Sisyphus, Camus introduces the concept of the absurd, the tension between human desire for meaning and the silent, indifferent universe. Imagine Sisyphus, cursed by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down. Camus argues that life is much like this myth. We strive, we search, we question, and yet we are met with silence. The universe doesn't answer back. But rather than descending into despair, Camus proposes a radical response: revolt. One must imagine Sisyphus happy, he concludes. The point, he argues, isn't to find meaning, but to live fully in the face of its absence. In other words, the refusal to be defeated by the absurd is the meaning. Psychological implications, the freedom of meaninglessness. From a psychological perspective, the idea that life has no intrinsic meaning can be initially terrifying, but ultimately liberating. Why terrifying? Because many people crave structure, purpose, and validation. A lack of meaning can lead to existential anxiety, depression, or a sense of alienation. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, famously argued that a will to meaning is essential for psychological health. According to Frankl, finding purpose even in the face of suffering is what allows us to endure. But what if we reverse the question? Instead of asking, "What is my purpose?" what if we ask, why must I have one? This reframing opens up a new psychological possibility, the freedom to live authentically without chasing after an elusive meaning. Without a predefined script, we're free to write our own. We can live moment to moment, guided by curiosity, connection, creativity, and compassion, rather than by an obligation to some cosmic blueprint. Meaning as a social construct. It's worth considering that much of what we call meaning is socially constructed. Careers, status, religion, and even romantic ideals are shaped by cultural narratives that change over time. A medieval peasant might have found meaning in serving a feudal lord and attending church. A 21st century person might find meaning in self-actualization, activism, or entrepreneurship. The point is, meaning is malleable. It shifts across cultures, generations, and even individuals over a lifetime. That suggests it may not be a fixed truth to discover, but rather a flexible lens through which we apply to our experiences. If meaning is constructed, then its absence is not a void, but a blank canvas. Art, play, and the joy of the absurd. Some of the most profound expressions of human life come not from chasing meaning, but from embracing the meaningless and finding joy despite it. Art, music, humor, and play often have no explicit point, and yet they're among the most cherished parts of being alive. Children don't ask why they're playing, they play. Musicians don't always write songs with a purpose. They compose because it feels good, because it connects them to others, or simply because they can. In a similar vein, many modern artists and writers have leaned into absurdity as a creative tool. From Samuel Beckett's bleakly funny plays to the surrealist paintings of Salvador Dali, the absurd becomes a mirror in which we can see the raw weirdness of existence and laugh at it. What if the real point of life isn't to find meaning, but to live meaningfully, moment by moment, despite its absence? Ethical implications. Can we be good without meaning? A standard critique of meaninglessness is that it undermines morality. If nothing matters, why should we act ethically? This is a misunderstanding. Many atheists, secular humanists, and existential thinkers argue that meaninglessness doesn't preclude morality, it reframes it. If life has no cosmic referee, then ethics become even more critical. We must decide, as a species and as individuals, what kind of world we want to live in. Compassion, kindness, justice, and love aren't meaningful because they're commanded by a deity or built into the fabric of the universe. They're meaningful because we choose to value them. That choice, freely made in the face of the absurd, is powerful. It makes goodness not a requirement, but a courageous act of creation. The paradox: creating meaning in a meaningless world. Here lies the ultimate paradox. The lack of inherent meaning may be precisely what allows for the most authentic forms of meaning. If life came preloaded with purpose, like a video game objective, we would follow instructions. But in a world where no script exists, we get to improvise. Love, creativity, and solidarity take on more profound significance when they're not required, but chosen. In that sense, the very absence of meaning is what enables our acts to matter. Meaning becomes not something we seek from the universe, but something we give to it. A new narrative: embrace the absurd. So what if life has no meaning? That's not a reason to despair. It's an invitation to freedom. To live without the pressure of perfection, without the burden of cosmic importance, and without the need to justify our existence to some external force. It's the chance to look at the stars not for answers, but for beauty. To love people not because they complete us, but because they're fellow travelers. To create, to explore, to laugh, to mourn, to dance, to fail, and to begin again, not for some grand purpose, but simply because we can. Maybe the point is not to find meaning, but to stop needing one. Perhaps the point is to live in such a way that the question no longer haunts us. Freedom in the face of nothingness. Life's lack of intrinsic meaning is not a glitch. It's a feature. It allows us to live without constraint, to define ourselves without boundaries, and to love without expectation of reward. The void is not empty. It's wide open. We don't need the universe to validate our existence. We don't need a purpose handed down from above. We are meaning makers, not meaning finders. The absence of meaning is not a tragedy. It's a blank page. So write your story, however absurd, beautiful, or fleeting it may be. Perhaps life has no meaning, and that's the point.